Hello and welcome to a watercolor paper deep dive and comparison. Today I want to show you different watercolor papers because I am in search of a favorite watercolor paper that I will use to bind watercolor sketchbooks and also just have a go-to to use for my own future paintings. The equipment we have are watercolor paper, masking tape, masking fluid, a palette, brushes, as well as watercolor. And the paper we have are these 8 sheets of mostly Hahnemühle paper, a German manufacturer. All of them, except for the upper right one, Agave, are 100% cotton, and all of them, except for the HM Collection 600, are cold press. This is just my personal preference, and Hahnemühle has this selection of watercolor sheets that you can buy in order to try out a lot of their paper they offer. I will try to do exactly the same thing on all of the different paper sheets. Therefore, I start with using masking tape on the lower right corner and then masking fluid to paint this little leaf structure in there. I have Sennelier, Schminke Horadam, Schminke Akademie. This one I'll have to look up what it was, and White Nights. And I also have a Daniel Smith. It's called Cascade Green by Daniel Smith. And I'll be using my Winsor & Newton Professional Watercolor Sable Pointed Round in size 5. I will stop by later in voiceover again, but for now let's just start painting on the paper.
No cap, you're the one I could love forever.
I definitely used too much pigment. I forgot how pigmented the Schminke Horadam is. I'll use it again over the masking tape, but in a thinner layer. Maybe I'll even mix it in the palette. And I'll just dabble a bit of White Nights paint in there.
Baby, you've been racing through my mind. Made it there in record time.
Yeah, this is, I mean, it's almost as if it's resistant against water. Very interesting. Not my cup of tea, definitely. It's repelling the pigment. This is Horadam Gouache. And this is Designer's Gouache. Also from Schminke. What is happening? This is so crazy. I never worked with a paper like this. And I hate it. Obviously, you have to work with it in a different way than I am right now. I'll continue swatching on it, of course, so that you can make sure if it's a good fit for you. Next up we have some... oh no, we still have the Academie gouache. I want to try that as well. But I'll use a different brush for this because it is quite rough on the brushes. And I don't want to ruin my nice watercolor sable one.
Don't nobody else compare, 'cause what you got is something really rare, baby. So get ready, set, go, 'cause baby.
Alright, I got some fresh water because now I want to put water on the paper first and then the pigment. And I also have some Inktense pencils as well as different brands of watercolor pencils that I'm gonna try out on there as well, and I'll need clean water for that. It's so fascinating that they are all cold pressed except for the rough one. I'm glad I'm doing this. Very, very happy with the favorites I can already tell I have, and the ones that are definitely not for me, but I'll do a review at the end. Next up, before I wash these brushes, are the water-soluble pencils. You know, you can probably tell by now what my favorite colors are. Okay, let's try the Inktense. I'll do a layer, a thin layer, a thicker layer, and I'll try to make a gradient.
I saw you inside, it was a cold tonight. You show like different intoxicants to make you feel alright. Now I'm sitting here, holding back tears and fears. You're just my type.
I'll use this water pen brush just to make sure that the brush is clean. Next up, these are also watercolor pencils. They are from Faber-Castell, Albrecht Dürer. Okay, we are back. I am about to get rid of the masking fluid. Okay, let's talk about the Hahnemühle, or HM I will say, because most of these are Hahnemühle papers, HM collection. On the left side there are 300 grams per square meter cold press, 640 grams per square meter rough paper on the right side. The difference in price is definitely noticeable to this 640 grams paper. I believe it is one of the most expensive papers you can get from Hahnemühle, but it was in this set, this paper collection, therefore I wanted to try it out. And I'm glad I did, because I like the 300 grams per square meter even better. Let's start with the watercolors. You can tell, especially here with the Academie or the Sennelier as well as the Horadam, that you would need more water, more pigment to achieve the same saturation. Of course, you can layer more with such a high density, but you would need more watercolor as well. The wet in wet patch worked very nicely with both of these, as well as the gradient. I think the gradient is one of the best in all the papers on this paper. Now for the gouache, it's basically the same, I believe. Maybe because the gouache sits more on top of the surface instead of sinking into the paper as much. These are incredible results with gouache. Neocolor, the Inktense pencils, as well as the water-soluble pencils, most times will behave about the same, because the rougher the surface, the more pigment will be collecting on different spots instead of distributing evenly. And I think there are better papers for these kinds of mediums. And lastly is this ink, acrylic ink, and that's doing a very nice job. Even though I did my best to disrupt the surface by adding a blob of water at the very end, it is such a smooth, even surface. Incredible paper, suitable for many different things, but very expensive. Let's take a look at the next two. On the left, we have one of the most affordable 100% cotton papers from H&M, which is just called Hahnemühle, and it is available in 200 and 300 grams per square meter. This is the 300 grams per square meter, and it is cold press. On the right, this is the H&M Agave 290 grams per square meter cold press, and it is the only one that isn't 100% cotton. I still wanted to try it out. It is only 30% cotton and 70% sisal or sisal fibers. And you can tell every step of the way. I was able to tell the difference immediately. You truly can't compare them. It's not a bad paper, but next to the others, it's doing an awful job, which is why I will try not to be too harsh on it, but it is absolutely not going to be my paper of choice. Now, I already painted on the HM 200, and it is a solid choice. Let's take a look at the watercolors. You can tell that even if the pigment is not actively distributed evenly, it is trying to do so by itself. It has a very smooth surface. Even the granulating color is very smooth. The wet and wet, I'm not impressed. No. Let's take a look at the same over here. The watercolors are all right, I'd say. The gradient, well, I would have had to wet the paper differently and more extensively, but the purpose of this was to do the exact same thing every time, so this is what the result with how I did that, which is not good. The masking fluid worked fine, but the tape ripped the paper the most. This is the worst of all the tape results. The gouache I like the least on this one. It is pretty blotchy. The Agave paper did do a good job on the Watercolor Pencils, Inktense and the Neocolor. I have to give it at least that. And the Hahnemühle 300 was alright with the pencils. So a solid choice would be the HM, and as I mentioned, one of, I believe, the most affordable cotton paper from Hahnemühle. Next up we have Expression as well as Turner, 300 grams per square meter as well, both cold press. It says in the description of the Hahnemühle Turner paper that it is for seasoned, experienced watercolor artists, and I don't seem to be that. I struggled so much with it. As I was using the watercolor pencils, the surface lost some little fibers, and now the surface is very rough and I don't think I could do anything else on top of it. I disliked this the most. I'm obviously not good at working with this paper. I'm sure it can do incredible things, but it is not for me at all. Even though the HM Expression is a cold press paper, it has a very smooth surface. You can tell with the watercolors as well as with the gouache that the pigment tries to distribute evenly. The wet and wet did okay, I think. The acrylic ink is nicely saturated. In general, the saturation is different to the other papers, in my opinion. I did not enjoy working with the pencils and Caran d'Ache Neocolor, but with watercolor and gouache, it did an incredible job. The last two I want to talk about are the Saunders and Waterford 300 grams per square meter cold press, as well as the Clairefontaine Fontaine paper, also 300 grams per square meter cold press. The Saunders and Waterford has more texture than the Clairefontaine. The watercolor is doing a fine job, and the wet in wet patches where my favorites on these two papers. They did very, very good. I did not enjoy the pencils as much as I did on the Fontaine paper, simply because it is a bit smoother. The masking fluid and masking tape worked very well on both of these. And because the Fontaine is doing an overall really solid job, it is one of my favorites so far. I'll have to take a look at all of them, but then I will for sure decide on a favorite. A very important medium I forgot to test completely are brush pens. So I tried them out on the other half of all of these little paper sheets I still have. What I'm doing is I place lots of color, lots of watercolor from the brush pens on there, and then I take the Faber-Castell water brush and just try to mix them together as seamlessly as possible. And the results on some of these papers were catastrophic and some of others were perfect. I'm very glad I still did that test, because my until then favorite paper, the Clairefontaine Fontaine paper, did a horrendous job. It looks awful. Let's go from worst to best. The worst was definitely the Fontaine. Then almost just as bad was the Waterford Saunders paper, which surprised me a lot. Both of these did such an incredible job with watercolors. Then the H.M. Turner was better, definitely, but not great. And surprisingly, the Agave did a good job as well. The H.M. Collection 640 is doing a great job, of course, but where it really is getting into the proper brush pen paper territory are my top 3 picks, which are the H.M. 300 as well as the H.M. Expression. They are almost a tie, and then on first place it's the H.M. Collection 300. These are my top 3 picks. Hahnemühle Collection 300 grams per square meter, cold press. Hahnemühle 300, cold press. And the Hahnemühle Expression 300 grams per square meter, cold press as well. I do hope this was helpful to you, and I'd also love to hear if you have a favorite, if you had an easier time deciding, because for me it was definitely difficult. Which of these 8 watercolor papers is your favorite? Which one did you not like that much? And do you think I was too harsh on any of them? Let me know in the comment. I love to chat about art supplies, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!